Iran's supreme leader issues a warning to the United States amid growing concerns the U.S. could openly enter the Israel-Iran conflict. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. U.S. President Donald Trump says he doesn't want the United States to get involved in a war with Iran, but reiterated his position on Wednesday that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Trump met again Wednesday with his national security team to work through his options. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warned any U.S. strikes on its territory will have serious, irreparable consequences. Israeli defense forces say jets on Wednesday targeted nuclear and weapons production sites in Tehran, while Iran responded with dozens of drone attacks. For more on the Israel-Iran conflict, let's bring in our panel. Here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio is Negar Mortazavi. She's a journalist and political analyst and editor and host of the Iran podcast. Dan Arbell is a scholar in residence with the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. And from Boston, Kaveh Afrasiabi is an author and political scientist specializing in Iran's foreign and nuclear affairs. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Kaveh, let me start with you. As I said, President Trump says he is still deciding whether to reveal the U.S. involvement in the assault against Iran. He also said that Iran has offered to send a delegation to Washington. Let's listen to some of what the president had to say.
Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction, why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. It's very sad to watch this. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
Now, the Iranians, for their part, deny offering to send a delegation to Washington. They deny making any such gesture. Here is Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
The President of the United States has resorted to threats against us. Not only does he issue threats, but in a crude and unacceptable manner. He explicitly calls upon the Iranian nation to come and surrender to me. Such statements are truly astonishing. Firstly, one should direct threats only at those who fear them.
So, Kaveh, President Trump has also called for Iran's unconditional surrender. Given these statements, what do you make of the conflict and the status of that conflict right now? And where do diplomatic efforts stand?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that we're on the cusp of a historical deja vu, just like 2002 when, all these hoax about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction surfaced, and Prime Minister Netanyahu went to the U.S. Congress with all that hoopla about, proof of an active WMD program on Iraq by convincing the Bush administration to drop the bombs on Saddam Hussein with all those dire consequences. We see a very similar situation today when today the head of the IAEA stated that he has not seen any evidence that Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons. The same exact statement that was made by Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the U.S. intelligence, that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons, a finding of 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, which was readily dismissed by President Trump just yesterday. So I really think at this point the writing is on the wall, and I'm very pessimistic that any diplomatic solution would transpire, and President Trump, in order to appear presidential, dodge his domestic problems and all the rest, will heed Mr. Netanyahu's encouragement to get into this war and go after Iran. And I really don't buy the official ideology or narrative that this is, for dismantling Iran's nuclear program. If that were the case, you wouldn't see the Israelis bombing Tehran's police stations and so on. I really think the aim is to dismantle the Islamic Republic, sow chaos, something like what happened in 2011 after Gaddafi's downfall.
Yeah.
So that on the southern flank of Russia, which is engaged in that terrible war with Ukraine, you would have chaos and instability.
Yeah.
So there's a indirect linkage between the Ukraine war and this war, which is about to be Americanized, with very dire consequences.
All right, let me go
just
to
as we
Dan.
from
Yeah, let me go to Dan Arbell on this. Dan, you know, as Kaveh Afrasiabi tells us, the United Nations has come to the conclusion that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. The United States' own intelligence community says the same. So where is Prime Minister Netanyahu getting this idea that Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon and possibly using it?
Good evening, Anand. It's totally false. What Kaveh is presenting one side of the story, not completing the information, according to which the IAEA has just today announced that Iran is hiding parts of its nuclear program, which is designed for military purposes. No one is under the illusion that Iran's program is for peaceful purposes or for environmental purposes or just electricity. This is a full-fledged nuclear program aimed at reaching a nuclear weapon. And there's also a weaponization program and the ballistic missile program. These are all parts of a master plan by Iran, beginning in the beginning of this century, continuing with some interruptions, but Iran never actually stopped.
Yeah.
Developing and enriching uranium at 60% or at 80%,
Right.
all that points to clear path towards a nuclear weapon.
Okay, Dan, I want to...
Don't buy the argument that they're not. So.
Right, I want to get to something that's happening right now. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his security cabinet on Wednesday night in Jerusalem. Israel is awaiting a decision from the United States on whether it will make public its decision to join in the attack on Iran. Netanyahu, for his part, has thanked the United States for its support. Let's listen to what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
I want to thank President Trump, a great friend of the State of Israel. I thank him for being at our side, and I thank him for the support the United States gives us in defending Israel's skies.
So, Dan, what do you believe will happen if the United States joins this attack against Iran and starts dropping bombs on Iranians?
You know, Israel's so far had really spectacular accomplishments, striking out strategic facilities, personnel, leaders of the military, of the national security and nuclear scientists, and so on and so forth. But still, there are some facilities that belong to the Iran nuclear program which are hidden, which are underground. And Israel needs these U.S. bombers to complete the job, to take out these facilities, especially the facility in Fordow, which is underground and where a lot of the enrichment is taking place. And if the U.S. joins and will help eliminate the Fordow site, or at least scale it back in a dramatic way, that would definitely add to the gains that Israel's already achieved in this campaign.
Okay, Negar, let's get to the studio. Since last Friday, Israel has hit a number of Iranian nuclear installations. It has also assassinated military leaders and killed dozens of civilians, including children. We've seen pictures of bombs hitting apartment blocks. It set off 2 car bombs in the streets of Tehran and bombed the television center. What can you tell us about this and conditions in the city right now?
Well, 200-something civilians was the latest we heard a couple of days ago, 1,500 injured at least. Yeah. And as you're saying, I mean, the attacks or the war is being framed as a war on Iran's nuclear program, but civilians are also seeing bombs dropped on their heads from day one. We saw a civilian told, I spoke to friends and loved ones on the ground. They woke up middle of the night, ground shaking, hearing explosions, jets flying overhead, really bringing back memories of the 1980s Iran-Iraq war. I grew up in Tehran through that war as a child. I remember hearing the bomb sirens, running to the basements or shelters, and then coming back up to see which neighbor was bombed. So it's kind of bringing back that memory, and then everything that comes with the chaos. So people who had the privilege, able to leave Tehran, had to wait in gas station lines for hours and hours. I spoke to a family who waited 6-7 hours in a gas station line, and then 12 hours on the road overnight to get to a city that's just 2-3 hours drive from Tehran. So it's very complicated, chaos, absolute shock and horror was what civilians have been dealing with. And in the days following that, we see that even when it's, for example, a nuclear scientist or a commander who's targeted in an apartment building, a lot of people in the surrounding area are impacted, dead, injured. It's just impossible. And these people are also sleeping in their homes with their families, women and children. So the civilian toll is high. And looks like Benjamin Netanyahu finally got his regime change war on Iran that he's been wishing and pushing the U.S. for the past 2 decades. And now President Trump, who is supposed to be the president of peace, peace through strength, is eventually letting this next big Middle East war start on his watch, whereas he hasn't made peace between Russia and Ukraine or in Gaza.
Right. We've also heard President Trump say that Tehran should evacuate. This is a city of 10 million people. I mean, is there a sense of panic when you hear something like that from the U.S. president?
Absolutely. I mean, first is, do we take this seriously? It's something posted on Truth Social. And how, I mean, he's the president of the United States and also implicit or indirectly supporting this war. But then at the same time, how do you evacuate a metropolis of 10 million people? Where do these people go? Women, children, disabled, elderly. And why? What is going to come? Is it going to be heavy bombing? Is it going to be, as has been promised by senior officials, Tehran turning into another Beirut? Is it a nuclear bomb coming? You know, it's that sense of panic, and also how serious can you take the president of the U.S.? Or is this just a negotiating tactic? Is this just to create chaos and fear and leverage for Iran to then go back to the negotiating table and accept the offer? But the toll of this is going to be on civilians, both mentally, of course, physically. Real lives here are on the line.
Okay, and at this stage, we welcome to the studio Edmund Ghareeb. He is an academic and Middle East expert. Edmund, great to see you.
Thank you.
Israel, as we just heard, has bombed Israeli nuclear installations as well as civilian apartment buildings, and the country's main state television headquarters was also bombed. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has called for de-escalation. Iran has called for another meeting of the Security Council. Here is the Iranian permanent representative, Ali Bahraini, speaking at the UN. Let's watch.
When you look at the positions of different countries, Western countries, European countries, not only they are not condemning the attacks and aggression, they are trying to justify the aggression by baseless allegations, by baseless excuses, and it is shameful for those Western countries who are supporting the aggressor.
So, Edmund, my question is, has the United States or Israel shown any evidence that Iran is building a nuclear bomb? In fact, back in March, when the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, appeared in Congress at a hearing, she was pretty clear about that. There was no evidence that Iran is doing this.
Clearly, I think the Israelis have been saying that Iran is very close to building a nuclear weapon, and within weeks, I remember around 2011, 2012, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we're only a couple of weeks away, a few weeks away from building a nuclear weapon. And as far back as we just heard from my colleague here, as it goes back to the mid-90s. At that time, he began to speak that Iran is almost very close, within a few months, in fact, and less than a year, they're going to have a nuclear bomb. Well, Iran could have built a bomb if it was wanted to build a bomb all this time, but apparently the Iranians didn't want to do that. There's no doubt that they're sending a message. They are basically enriching uranium, and this is a message that's being sent, that if you continue to escalate, and ultimately what we are going to seeing now, if these attacks continue, I think they're going to drive Iran to build a nuclear weapon. Because the Iranians take a look at the various experiences. Look what happened to Saddam Hussein when he started to build a nuclear, and it was for civilian purposes, it was destroyed. Gaddafi, when he gave up his nuclear, capabilities, he was attacked and he was destroyed. While North Korea, when they developed their nuclear capability, they were able to build bombs as well as missiles capable of carrying them. The United States is not attacking them. So what I'm very much concerned about is that what the Israelis are doing, and if the United States joins them, all that's going to do is going to drive them and maybe other parties in the Middle East to build nuclear weapons. While the Israelis, in fact, they have nuclear weapons. They are not allowing the International Atomic Energy Agency to even inspect theirs. So that raises a lot of questions.
Kaveh Afrasiabi, there are provisions in international law for preemptive strikes if a country feels that it is imminently threatened by another. When you look at these strikes against Iran, which Israel says are preemptive strikes, are those international legal provisions met?
Well, this is a clear violation of the UN Charter because Iran had not militarily made an imminent threat against Israel to warrant this unprovoked attack on it. And Israel is also in violation of various international protocols prohibiting armed strike against nuclear facilities, because what Israel is doing is very dangerous and it can cause radiation releases that harm the population, the environment, even neighboring countries. So bear that in mind. Not only that, if President Trump gives the go-ahead for the bombs to drop on Iran, Iran's supreme leader made it very clear today that there's going to be irreparable damages. Iran has a lot of naval assets that can come into play. It can probably consider the option of blocking the Strait of Hormuz, where 30% of the oil transits through there, and that will impact the world economy and skyrocketing of oil prices and a lot of other consequences. Take the damages that Israel has sustained so far, because all we hear in the US media for the most part is what Israel has done to Iran. But Iran has penetrated the Israeli Iron Dome, and a lot of these missiles, hypersonic ones especially, hit their targets: military, scientific, economic, energy, and they can go after Israel's desalination plants, which Israel relies for 55% of its water needs, and the whole country would go dry after that. So if Israel continues this, there's going to be more severe reprisals by Iran impacting its energy needs, its water needs, and so on. So Israelis should be very careful. They're playing with fire, and this could have very dire consequences for them. They have not won this war, by the way, and it's not winnable. Let me conclude that even by Wall Street Journal's admission, Israel's munitions, anti-air munitions, are running out, and Iran has more missiles than Israel has.
All right, let me go. There's a lot in there, and I want Dan Arbell to respond to it. Dan, I want to start off with what kind of impact are these Iranian attacks on Israel having?
Well, look, Anand, it's just ridiculous to listen to the other speakers portray Iran as a poor, innocent victim. Iran has been building a war machine for years, has been supporting terrorist organizations across the region, has been destabilizing the region, meddling in the affairs of Arab Sunni regimes. It's really portraying Iran as an innocent victim is
Israel has been an island of
one moment, Kaveh. Let Dan speak. Dan, go ahead.
I didn't interrupt you, so please don't interrupt me. Then also in terms of how this is, of course, Israel anticipated a retaliation. Iran's retaliation for the last week, mostly at nighttime in Israel, has actually caused damage, has hit civilian areas. Most of the people killed in Israel, 25 people, are civilians, not military personnel or army personnel. Devastation of some in residential neighborhoods. But we see in the last few nights that there's much less missiles being fired from Iran, and perhaps contrary to what Kaveh is saying, we see more actually that Iran is running out of missiles, while Israel still has quite a few missiles and is also dominating the military campaign so far.
Okay, I want to get to Negar. Negar, President Trump says that Iran should have negotiated before the Israeli attack. That's a little bit puzzling because wasn't Iran already in negotiations over its nuclear program? In fact, there was a meeting scheduled for the Sunday after the Friday attack, wasn't there? And of course, it was President Trump that withdrew from the initial JCPOA nuclear agreement.
Indeed, as you said, so Iran did negotiate a deal with the United States under President Obama 2015. Took 2 years of intense negotiations. This is not an easy negotiation on a nuclear program. President Trump pulled out of that in hope of a better deal. He issued maximum pressure on Iran, didn't get a better deal. And then this time around, he started negotiations, look like they're in good faith, and he really does want a deal in diplomacy with Iran. But throughout the negotiations, the goalposts started to move. And initially, he was saying that no nuclear weapons, they can't have nuclear weapons, which as U.S. intelligence does approve, it is not a nuclear weapons program. But then towards the end, he was saying no enrichment, zero enrichment, or other officials were saying total dismantlement of the nuclear program, including the civilian program, which for the Iranians is a non-starter. And then the most recent was scheduled, as you said, on Sunday, and came the Israeli attack out of nowhere for the Iranians on Friday. So I think this indicates also, looking at the big picture, one of the main targets, if not the main target of this attack, was diplomacy between Tehran and Washington, which is something Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to sabotage since under President Obama, President Trump, Biden, and throughout these negotiations, and it looks like he's achieved that.
So when President Trump says, Negar, that Iran should have negotiated before the attack, that's not true, is it?
Well, I think what maybe he means is that Iran should have taken his offer on the table, which was unacceptable to the Iranians. So that's not negotiation. That's basically, I give you an offer, making no concessions. So I think what they're not prepared to do is making concessions, this administration. Like the understanding of diplomacy that you go to the table, give and take with your adversary. It's uncomfortable. You give something, you take something. So there was an offer, Steve Witkoff, special envoy, brought to the Iranians. It was unacceptable to the Iranian side, also considering the goalpost had moved. And then it looks like from the New York Times reporting just recently that the pressure came on President Trump that this is the only deal acceptable. And then finally, the Israelis told him that we are going for this attack, which the U.S. initially said we had no role in, Secretary Rubio, White House. And then little by little, it looks like President Trump thought this is actually going great. He's calling it excellent. And now there's talks of him potentially bringing the U.S. into the war.
Right. Edmund, on the question of negotiations, we had a report late today that 3 Iranian-registered planes registered to the Iranian government left the country for Oman. And Oman has been playing the role of an intermediary before. What does that tell you? Could this be the beginning of some kind of diplomatic resolution?
I think this might be. We don't know enough about it, but I think clearly that there is an effort. That's why I think President Trump has said that let's wait and see. Next week, we are going to be very close to making a decision. But I think that there's a lot of pressure right now on the U.S. government, on Netanyahu's government, on the Iranian government. Everybody is in a very difficult situation, and I think it would make a lot of sense to go back to the negotiations. Right. But as we just heard, the problem was when the Witkoff reached an agreement, or at least told the Iranians that he would be willing to accept the enrichment of uranium between 3 and 5%. And after that, when he came back, and this was published here, and there was a lot of criticism against him by pro-Israelis, and he retreated. And so basically, this is one of the issues. This raises questions about the ability of the United States to play this diplomatic role, to negotiate, because this is undermining, in a sense, the reputation, the credibility of the United States government. When you say we are entering into negotiations, when, as you pointed out, the negotiation was supposed to take place the next round, the 6th round on Sunday, and yet the 2 days before we hear of this sudden attack, and the president says afterwards, although Secretary Rubio said we had nothing to do with it, we didn't know, but the president said, I knew from the beginning. So that raises a lot of question also about the credibility of the U.S. and whether or not the U.S. could play the role of a negotiator. However, there has been also some news, I don't know how accurate it is, that the Russians have talked to both sides.
Yeah.
And I think they are going to be playing a role in this area.
Okay.
If that's the case, I think that would be a very significant development
Right.
that could avoid the disaster that we are seeing in the region now.
Okay, Kaveh, I've just got a few minutes left. The foreign ministers of the United Kingdom, of France, and Germany will hold talks with their Iranian counterpart in Geneva, and those talks will take place on Friday. Reuters reports that the goal of these talks is to get an undertaking or some kind of guarantee from the Iranians that their nuclear program will be used for civilian purposes only. This is something that Iran has been saying for a long time. But what do you make of this latest effort by these foreign ministers meeting with Iran?
Well, first of all, let me say that Foreign Minister Arakchi today flatly denied the report by Reuters that an Iranian delegation has gone to Oman to sit down and talk with the Americans. He said that as long as this war is raging on, we're not interested in any talks with the U.S. So let's be very clear about that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of disinformation in order to convey the image of a weakened Iran that would serve their war purposes. And therefore, we should not really adopt everything at face value.
Okay.
And the Israelis are the masters of disinformation. A lot of lies that they relay through the mainstream U.S. media, as we know. I am very skeptical about any European role in this because we saw the travesty of their one-sided statement at the G7 meeting when they reiterated the old rhetoric that Israel has the right to defend itself for an aggressor nation that has violated the sovereignty of another country. They also did not endorse a statement by Russia, China, and 5 other countries at the IAEA meeting to condemn Israel's attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, which are under IAEA safeguards. We are even having, IAEA inspectors at those facilities during this war.
Okay, Kaveh, I need to get to Dan. I've got less than a minute left. Dan, one final point. What is Israel's goal, its ultimate goal in this? Is it to degrade Iran's nuclear program, destroy it completely, or are we talking regime change?
I think first and foremost is to derail Iran's nuclear program and to deal it a devastating blow that will be very hard for Iran to entertain that idea anytime soon. Regime change is not a stated goal. I don't think that Israel will be sad if that happens, but it's not a stated goal that Israel is working towards.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.